Sunlight spilled across the sidewalk like it was trying to dry yesterday's mistakes, glinting off puddles left by a soft morning drizzle. The street was already awake. Bus brakes hissed at the corner. A cyclist rang a bell once, sharp and bright. The city hummed gently. Engines, footsteps, distant sirens wrapped in daylight. Evan Carter adjusted his tailored jacket as he stepped out of his black sedan. The morning sun caught the edge of his collar, and he squinted slightly, annoyed more by the brightness than the weather. He checked his watch. 9:02 a.m. Late. Across the street, the glass walls of Bright Fork Bistro reflected the pale blue sky and drifting clouds. Inside, the espresso machine hissed like a restless animal. Cutlery clattered. The breakfast crowd was already heavy. Evan straightened his shoulders and crossed the street. His shoes clicked crisply against the pavement. Sharp, clean sounds that cut through the softer shuffle of passers-by. Coins clattered into a busker's open guitar case near the door. The smell of coffee and warm bread floated into the open air. This restaurant was his kingdom. Inside, sunlight poured through tall front windows and spilled across polished wooden floors. Dust motes floated lazily in the bright air. A hostess laughed softly with a couple near the door. Plates moved with confidence. Everything ran on rhythm. Except today. Manager's in. One of the servers murmured. Evan passed through the dining room like a shadow, unsmiling, focused. He nodded once at the head chef through the open kitchen window. The chef gave a tight nod back, not friendly. Efficient that he stopped near the front windows. Outside, just across the glass, she stood. The woman looked out of place against the warm, welcoming light of the cafe. Her coat was thin and soaked from the drizzle. Gray hair escaped from beneath a faded blue knit cap. She held a paper cup with both hands, knuckles pale. People walked around her. Some glanced once and looked away. Others didn't look at all. She wasn't begging loudly. She was just there. Evan exhaled sharply. Is that still happening? He muttered. The hostess followed his gaze. She's been outside since earlier this morning. Why hasn't anyone moved her along? She hasn't done anything wrong. The girl said quietly. Evan's jaw tightened. She's bad for business. He stepped toward the door. The bell chimed as he pushed it open. Cool, damp air brushed his face. The drizzle had thinned to a mist, barely visible in the sunlight. The woman looked up slowly. Her eyes were tired. Not desperate, just worn. Ma'am, Evan said briskly, keeping his voice professional, detached. You can't stand here. You're blocking the entrance. She blinked at him. I'm not blocking anyone, love. I'm just trying to get out of the rain. There's a public shelter 3 blocks that way, he said, pointing without looking. You need to move along. Her hands tightened around the cup. They don't open until noon. That's not my problem. People passing slowed. One woman hesitated near the door. A man paused mid-step. The city hum softened, as if the street itself were listening. The woman glanced at the warm glow behind him. Tables filled with food, laughter, steam rising from mugs. I used to come here, she said gently. Years ago, before things. Evan cut her off. This is a private business. If you don't leave, I'll call someone to remove you. A flicker moved across her face. Not anger. Not fear. Shame. Slowly, she stepped back. The drizzle darkened the sleeves of her coat even more. Her shoes squeaked faintly against the wet pavement. All right, she said. I'll go. For a moment, she just stood there, as if steadying herself. Then she turned and walked down the sunlit street, her figure small against the brightness. Inside, the door closed softly behind Evan. The restaurant noise rushed back in. The espresso machine hissed. Cutlery clattered. A laugh rang out near the windows. But something about the light felt different now. Later that morning, Evan stood near the register reviewing numbers on his tablet. The lunchtime rush was beginning to build. Business, as usual, was good. Then his phone buzzed. He almost ignored it. Almost. Unknown number. Annoyed, he stepped toward the quieter corner near the hallway and answered. This is Carter. A calm male voice replied. Is this Evan Carter, general manager of Bright Fork Bistro on Linden Street? Yes. Who's calling? A pause. Then, you threw my mother out into the rain this morning. The warmth drained from the room. Evan's fingers tightened around his phone. I think you have the wrong. We have you on camera, the voice said quietly. And I'd strongly suggest you answer your phone again in the next 10 minutes. The call disconnected. Evan stood frozen. Sunlight streamed across the floor. And for the first time that day, he felt cold. The lunch rush rolled in under bright skies and restless light. Sunlight reflected off passing cars outside the windows. Shadows slid slowly across the floors. The dining room filled with voices, forks tapping against plates, glasses clinking. Evan tried to focus, but he failed. His phone sat heavy in his palm. Screen dark, the call replayed in his head. "You threw my mother out into the rain." "Evan?" The head chef called from the pass. "Table 12's holding." "1 minute," Evan said. His voice tighter than he intended. He shoved the tablet aside and stepped into the hallway. The quieter space echoed faintly. Footsteps, distant kitchen noise. The low hum of the building. He called the number back. IT went to voicemail. He swallowed. An hour passed. Then the lunch crowd thinned under the bright afternoon light. One by one, tables emptied. The city outside moved steadily, buses braking, people laughing. A dog barking once in the distance. To at 2:14 p.m. The restaurant doors opened again. A man stepped inside, early 30s. Clean cut, calm, wearing a simple gray jacket and jeans. Not rich looking, but his presence shifted the room. He scanned the dining area once. Then his eyes found Evan. They locked. The man walked toward him slowly. Sunlight poured in behind him, flaring around his shoulders. "Evan Carter," he said, stopping a few feet away. "We meet at last." Evan straightened. "You're the one who called." The man nodded. "Daniel." A silence stretched between them, thick under the afternoon glow. "You embarrassed my mother today," Daniel said calmly. Evan's defensiveness flared. "Your mother was loitering outside my business and discouraging customers. She was standing in the rain." "She was," Daniel lifted a hand. "I'm not here to argue facts," he said, "because I have them." He pulled out his phone and tapped the screen once. Evan's own voice echoed faintly from the speaker. "This is a private business. If you don't leave, I'll call someone to remove you." The room seemed to grow quieter. A nearby server slowed mid-step. Daniel lowered the phone. "That woman you dismissed used to manage a hospital budget larger than this entire block." Evan scoffed reflexively. "People say things when they're desperate. My mother doesn't." Daniel leaned in slightly. "She also paid for this restaurant's first renovation." That landed. Evan's lips parted, but no sound came out. Daniel continued. "Back when it was failing, before you ever worked here, she believed in this place when no one else did." Evan shook his head. "That's not possible. Our investor group changed hands," Daniel said quietly. "Years ago. Look up the foundation, Harlow Community Trust." Evan swallowed. "That's her." A long silence followed. Sunlight shifted across Daniel's face. "But that's not why I'm here," Daniel said. Evan braced. "Then why?" Daniel's voice dropped. "Because she didn't tell me what happened today. I found out from the shelter intake nurse. She collapsed an hour after you sent her out in the weather." Evan's breath caught. "What?" "Exposure," Daniel said, "mixed with dehydration. She's stable, but barely." The noise of the restaurant faded into a distant blur. Evan's fingers trembled. Daniel studied him. "You see, I wasn't planning to come here today, but when the nurse said where she'd been standing before she fainted," he gestured around them, "I knew exactly where to go." Evan's mouth was dry. "I didn't know." "No," Daniel said calmly. "You didn't care to know." Customers nearby were openly watching now. Conversations had dipped into murmurs. Evan became suddenly aware of every face, of the sunlight, of how small he felt beneath it. "What do you want?" Evan asked quietly. Daniel's eyes softened, not with mercy, but with sadness. "I want you to come and see her." Evan hesitated. "Now," Daniel said. They walked out together into the bright afternoon. The drizzle had stopped completely. The street looked clean, almost kind. Puddles reflected sky and passing faces. Inside the car ride, no one spoke. The hospital entrance. Sunlight washed over pale stone and glass. People entered and exited in soft, quiet rhythms. A child laughed near the doors. A nurse pushed a wheelchair past them. Evan's footsteps sounded too loud. The hallway inside was bright, clean, smelled of soap and warm air. His own footsteps echoed beside Daniel's. They stopped at a curtained room near a window. Daniel paused before pulling it aside. Evan's hands tightened. Inside, the woman lay propped up in the bed. Sunlight fell gently across her face. She looked smaller than she had on the street. Fragile, her eyes opened slowly. "Daniel," she whispered. He smiled softly. "Hi, Mom." Her gaze drifted to Evan. Recognition flickered. He had never felt smaller in his life. "I'm sorry," Evan said suddenly. The words tumbled out. "I didn't know. I should have." She studied him. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, softly, "You were very afraid of something today." Evan blinked. "What?" "Looking weak," she said. "People who push others in the rain are usually running from their own storms." Tears burned his eyes. Outside the window, clouds moved lazily across a blue sky. Daniel exhaled slowly. "This isn't about punishment," he said to Evan. "It's about what happens next." Evan nodded, for once. He didn't argue. The next morning arrived slow and bright. Sunlight drifted across quiet buildings. A warm breeze moved tree leaves along the sidewalk. The world felt gentler than it had the day before. Evan sat alone on a wooden bench outside the hospital. He hadn't slept. His jacket rested beside him. His sleeves were rolled up. Sunlight warmed his arms, grounding him. People passed, nurses on break, visitors with coffee cups, an elderly man feeding birds crumbs from his palm. For the first time in years, Evan wasn't thinking about numbers, he was thinking about her. Daniel joined him with 2 paper cups. He handed one over. "Tea," he said. Evan accepted it. "Thanks." They sat in silence for a while. "She'll be able to move around in a few days," Daniel said. "Doctors say she's tougher than she looks." A pause. "She had a home once," Evan said quietly. Daniel smiled faintly. "She still does. She just forgot where it was for a while." Later that afternoon, Bright Fork Bistro reopened. But this time, something was different. The front windows were thrown open. Fresh flowers lined the entrance. Light spilled warmly across the floors. Evan stood at the door, not in a suit, in a simple shirt. When the woman returned 3 days later, it was in broad daylight. She walked carefully with Daniel beside her. The sun caught the silver in her hair. People at nearby tables slowly realized who she was. Evan stepped forward, no words, just a gentle nod that he opened the door for her. Inside, a small plaque already rested on the wall near the register. "This place exists because someone chose kindness first." She smiled at it. Later that week, Evan quietly donated his personal bonus to the local sheltered NO Press. NO announcement. Just action. One afternoon, as sunlight filtered through the restaurant's windows, she came back again. This time alone, she sat near the front. Evan brought her tea. They shared a quiet smile. Outside, the late afternoon sun painted everything gold. Final image. Evan watches the street through the glass as she walks back into the light. No longer alone. Moral true wealth isn't measured in pounds or dollars, but in the lives we lift as we rise.